The scream tore through the police radio at 3:17 a.m. Sharp enough to make Officer Ethan Cole slam the brakes so hard his patrol car skidded sideways. The dispatcher's voice cracked as she repeated the words no handler ever wants to hear. Officer down. K-29 unit involved. Possible fatal injuries. Ethan's chest locked. His grip tightened on the steering wheel as one name echoed in his mind shadow. His partner, his dog, his family. I share news stories here every day, and I would really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end. Ethan didn't remember driving the rest of the way. Red lights blurred past. Sirens wailed, but they felt distant, like echoes underwater. His heart hammered so violently it hurt. Shadow wasn't just a K-9. He was the reason Ethan survived his first year on the force. The reason he slept at night. The reason he still believed good could win. Write in the comments. And tell me which part of the world you're watching this story from. I'm really interested to see how far this story has traveled. When Ethan burst into the emergency veterinary clinic, the smell hit him first, antiseptic and fear. Officers lined the hallway in silence, hats clutched in their hands. No one met his eyes. That alone told him everything. A young nurse stepped forward, her face pale. Officer Cole. They're with him now. With who? Ethan snapped, already knowing the answer. Your K-9 partner. His legs moved before his mind caught up. The door to the treatment room swung open, and their shadow lay on a steel table. Black fur matted with blood, chest rising in shallow, uneven breaths. Tubes snaked from his body. Monitors beeped erratically. The dog who once tore through walls and leaped rooftops now looked impossibly small. Ethan dropped to his knees. Hey. Hey, buddy, he whispered, his voice breaking, despite years of training to stay calm under pressure. I'm here. I'm right here. Shadow's ears twitched. One cloudy eye cracked open just enough to see him. His tail didn't wag. He didn't lift his head. But with the last of his strength, Shadow dragged a trembling paw across the table until it brushed Ethan's hand. The vet cleared her throat behind him. Officer, I need to be honest. Ethan didn't turn. No, he said quietly. You don't. She hesitated anyway. He suffered massive internal trauma. We believe it happened during the warehouse raid. He's been holding on, but his organs are failing. We've done everything we can. Ethan finally stood, slowly, like his bones had turned to glass. Everything. His eyes burned. Because that dog has saved 6 officers, found 3 missing kids, and dragged me out of a burning car. Don't tell me this is everything. The vet's voice softened. Sometimes courage isn't enough. Shadow whimpered, a weak sound that sliced straight through Ethan's chest. He leaned forward again, pressing his forehead to the dog's. You're not done, he whispered. You hear me? You don't get to quit on me. Shadow's breathing hitched. Then something no one expected happened. The K-9 lifted his head just an inch. Teeth clenched as if the effort cost him everything. Slowly, painfully, he raised both front paws and wrapped them around Ethan's neck. Gasps filled the room. Shadow pulled him close in a desperate, clumsy hug, his body shaking violently. A low cry escaped his throat, not pain, not fear, but something deeper. Something knowing. Ethan froze. Tears spilled freely now, soaking into Shadow's fur. What are you doing? He whispered. You're supposed to be tough. You're supposed to scare bad guys, remember? Shadow pressed closer. The monitor began to spike, then drop, then spike again. The vet rushed forward, syringe in hand. Officer, we don't have much time. If we wait, wait. Another voice said sharply. Everyone turned. The senior surgeon had stepped closer to the monitor, Her eyes narrowed. She leaned down, listening to Shadow's chest, her expression changing from resignation to confusion. Then shock. "This isn't shutting down," she murmured. "This is reacting." She straightened abruptly. "Stop everything." Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. "What do you mean, stop?" The surgeon met his eyes. "I mean, this dog might not be dying." The room fell dead silent, and for the first time since the call came in, hope terrifying. Fragile hope entered the room. The word might echoed louder than the sirens ever had. "Might not be dying, officer." Ethan Cole stood frozen, one hand still tangled in Shadow's fur. Afraid that if he moved even an inch, whatever fragile chance they'd just uncovered would disappear. Around him, the room shifted from grief to urgency in a heartbeat. The vet lowered the syringe slowly, as if she didn't quite trust reality yet. "What do you see?" Ethan asked, his voice hoarse. The senior surgeon, Dr. Morales, leaned closer to the monitor. "His heart rate isn't collapsing the way organ failure would cause," she said. "It's reacting, spiking, dropping, like his body is responding to pain, not shutting down." Pain, that word hit Ethan harder than death ever could. Shadow whimpered softly, his paws still resting against Ethan's shoulders. His body trembled, not weak tense. Fighting Ethan felt it now, the difference he'd missed earlier. This wasn't the stillness of surrender. This was restraint. Control. "He's hurting," Ethan whispered. "Bad." Dr. Morales nodded. "And he's been hiding it?" 2 more vets rushed in. Oxygen levels were adjusted. Monitors recalibrated. A portable ultrasound machine was rolled beside the table, its wheels squeaking too loudly in the silence. "How long has he been like this?" one of them asked. Ethan swallowed. "He's been slower the past week." "Not much. Just quieter." His throat tightened. "I thought he was tired." Shadow had still trained, still searched, still guarded Ethan's blind side with the same fierce devotion. He'd eaten, drank water, wagged his tail at kids. During community patrols, he'd never once cried out. Dr. Morales ran the ultrasound probe along Shadow's ribcage. The screen flickered with blurry shape, organs, Shadow's movement. Shadow flinched sharply, a sudden jolt that made Ethan gasp. "There," the doctor said. "Did you see that?" Another vet leaned in. "Localized reaction. That's not systemic." Dr. Morales' jaw tightened. "This isn't illness. This is injury." Ethan's heart began to race. "What kind of injury?" "Internal trauma," she replied. "Possibly foreign." Foreign. A memory surged forward, uninvited. 3 weeks ago. A nighttime bust at an abandoned rail yard. A suspect running blind through twisted steel and rusted debris. Shadow had gone in first, as always. There had been shouting. A flash of movement. Then Shadow had yelped, not loud. Just quick, and kept running. Ethan had asked if he was okay. Shadow had wagged his tail once and sat, waiting for the next command. "He took a hit," Ethan said suddenly, "during a pursuit." "I thought it was nothing." Dr. Morales' eyes flicked to him. "Working dogs don't show pain unless they absolutely can't hide it." The ultrasound image sharpened, and then they all saw it. A dark, jagged shape lodged deep between Shadow's ribs. Silence slammed into the room. "That's metal," one vet whispered. Dr. Morales zoomed in, her face hardening. "Yes, and it's dangerously close to a major vessel." Ethan felt the floor tilt beneath him. "You're saying?" "He's been carrying that inside him." "For days," she said, "possibly weeks." Shadow let out a weak groan and pressed his head into Ethan's chest, as if apologizing. Ethan's vision blurred. "You stupid, brave idiot," Ethan whispered. kissing the top of Shadow's head. "You were protecting me again, weren't you?" The answer came not in words, but in trust. Shadow didn't pull away, didn't panic. He stayed right there, believing Ethan would fix it. Dr. Morale straightened. "We can operate." Hope surged so fast it almost hurt. "But," she continued, firm, "it's high risk. The object may have shifted. His vitals are unstable. We could lose him on the table." Ethan didn't hesitate. "Do it." She searched his face. "You understand the risk." "I understand Shadow," Ethan said. "And I know one thing, he's not done." Shadow's paw tightened weakly against his shoulder. Like agreement, the room erupted into motion. Surgical trays clattered. Gloves snapped on. Orders were barked. Shadow was gently lifted onto a stretcher, his body trembling but his eyes locked on Ethan's. "I'll be right here when you wake up," Ethan promised, jogging alongside them, just like always. At the operating room doors, a nurse stopped him. "You can't go any further." Ethan rested his forehead against Shadow's one last time. "Fight," he whispered, "like you always do." The doors swung shut, and as the red surgery light flicked on, Ethan realized something chilling. Shadow hadn't been saying goodbye earlier. He'd been asking for help. And now? Everything depended on whether they'd understood him in time. The waiting room had never felt so loud. Every tick of the clock sounded like a gunshot. Every footstep in the hallway made Officer Ethan Cole snap his head up, hoping furring it meant something had gone wrong. The red surgery in progress. Light glowed above the double doors like a warning he couldn't escape. Ethan sat forward in the hard plastic chair. Elbows on his knees, hands clenched so tightly his knuckles ached. He hadn't taken off his uniform. He didn't want to. It felt like armor-like if he stayed ready. Shadow would come back ready to dot minutes stretched into hours. His mind betrayed him. Replaying memories he couldn't shut off. Shadow as a 6-month-old pup. Ears too big for his head, tripping over his own paws during training. Shadow learning commands faster than any dog Ethan had ever seen. Shadow dragging him out of that overturned cruiser 2 winters ago while flames licked the doors. "You owe him." A voice inside Ethan whispered. The surgery doors burst open. Ethan jumped to his feet so fast the chair clattered backward. Dr. Morale stepped out. Her surgical mask pulled down, hair damp with sweat. One glance at her face told him this wasn't over yet. His heart stopped. She said, the words hit like a bullet. Ethan staggered, catching himself against the wall. "Stopped." He choked. As in flatlined for 17 seconds, she said quickly. "But we got him back." Air rushed into Ethan's lungs in a shaky gasp. "He fought," she continued, "harder than we expected." His heart responded to stimulation almost immediately. "That's Shadow," Ethan whispered hoarsely. "He doesn't quit." Dr. Morales nodded, her eyes tired but determined. "We're still operating. The fragment is deeper than imaging suggested." "If it shifts," she didn't finish the sentence. Ethan slid down the wall into the chair, hands shaking now. He pressed his palms together, forehead resting against them. And for the first time in years, he prayed, not like a cop, not like a handler, but like a man begging the universe not to take the one soul who had never abandoned him. Inside the operating room, Shadow's body was motionless under the lights. The metal fragment was revealed at last, jagged, sharp, embedded near a major artery. One wrong move could end everything. Dr. Morales worked with microscopic precision, her hand steady despite the stakes. "Stay with us, boy," she murmured. "Just a little longer." Shadow's heart monitor beeped unevenly, stubbornly alive. Then suddenly, alarm, pressure drop. A nurse shouted. Shadow's vitals plummeted. Ethan felt it. He didn't know how. but he felt it. He shot to his feet just as Dr. Morales rushed out again. "He's crashing," she said. "We're losing him." Ethan grabbed her arm, desperation raw in his eyes. "Let me see him." She hesitated. "Please," he said. "He needs to hear me." Something in her expression shifted. She nodded once. 2 minutes. That's all. Ethan was ushered into the operating room, the sterile brightness blinding. The sight of Shadow lying there still, broken, vulnerable nearly broke him. Machines beeped wildly. Hands moved fast. Voices overlapped. Ethan ignored them all. He moved to Shadow's head, gently placing his hands around the familiar shape. "Hey," he whispered. "Hey, look at me." No response. "Shadow." His voice cracked. "You've never left me." "Not once." "You hear me?" "You don't get to start now." The heart monitor dipped dangerously low. Ethan leaned closer, tears falling freely now. "You saved my life. You carried my weight when I couldn't stand. This time, let me carry you." Shadow's ear twitched, the monitor spiked. Again, Ethan pleaded. "Fight, just like you always do." A weak heartbeat returned. Then another, the room froze, heart rhythm stabilizing. Someone whispered. Dr. Morales stared at the monitor, stunned. He responded to voice stimulus. Ethan let out a broken laugh through tears. Of course he did. The fragment was removed seconds later. Metal hit the tray with a sharp clink. The danger wasn't gone, but the threat that had been killing Shadow silently was finally out. Ethan was escorted back to the waiting room, his legs barely holding him. The doors closed once more. This time, the weight felt different, still terrifying but threaded with hope, and somewhere beyond those doors, Shadow was still fighting, because he always had. The night refused to end. Officer Ethan Cole sat alone beneath the buzzing fluorescent lights, his back pressed against the cold wall, eyes locked on the surgery doors. His uniform was streaked with dried blood shadows, blood but he didn't notice. He only listened. Beep, beep, beep. That sound had followed him into his head, steady and fragile at the same time. Hours passed before the doors finally opened again. Dr. Morales stepped out slowly this time. No rushing, no shouting. Her mask hung loose around her neck, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. Ethan was on his feet instantly, heart pounding. "He's alive," she said before Ethan could speak. Ethan's knees nearly gave out. "We removed the fragment completely," she continued. It was a bullet shard, lodged deep. One more shift, and she shook her head. "We were seconds from losing him, but—" Ethan asked, afraid to hope too much. "But his heart is stabilizing," she said. "He's not out of danger. There's internal swelling and blood loss, but he made it through surgery." Ethan pressed a shaking hand to his face. "Can I see him?" "Not yet," she replied gently. "He's sedated. Let his body rest." Ethan nodded, though every instinct in him screamed to be at Shadow's side. Instead, he slid back down the wall, finally allowing the exhaustion to catch up with him. The clinic grew quiet. At some point, dawn crept in through the narrow windows, washing the hallway in pale gray light. Nurses moved softly. Phones rang and stopped. Life continued cruelly normal while Ethan waited for the world to decide whether it would give Shadow back. Late that morning, Dr. Morales returned. "He's waking up." Ethan was already moving before she finished the sentence. The recovery room smelled warmer, somehow like antiseptic, more like hope. Shadow lay on a padded mat, wrapped in bandages, chest rising and falling slowly. Tubes still surrounded him, but the frantic alarms were gone. Ethan knelt beside him, barely breathing. "Hey," he whispered. "Easy boy." Shadow's ear twitched. Ethan's breath caught. A second passed. Then Shadow's paw shifted slightly, claws scraping softly against the mat. "That's it," Ethan murmured, his voice trembling. "I'm here." Shadow's eyelids fluttered. Once, twice. Then one eye opened. It was glassy. Unfocused but alive, Ethan broke. Tears spilled down his face as he laughed and cried at the same time. Pressing his forehead gently against Shadow's. "You did it," he whispered. "You're still here." Shadow let out a weak, raspy whine and attempted to lift his head. Ethan immediately steadied him. "Don't move," he said softly. "You've already done enough." Shadow's tail thumped once. Just once. But it was everything Dr. Morales watched from the doorway, her eyes shining. "He recognized you immediately," she said. That connection kept him alive. Ethan stayed there for hours, talking softly, reminding Shadow of home, of training days, of the promise of a long rest ahead. Each word seemed to anchor the dog more firmly to the world. But hope came with questions. Later that afternoon, Dr. Morales asked Ethan to step into her office. On the desk lay a sealed evidence bag. Inside, it's the bullet fragment. "This wasn't recent," she said quietly. "There's scar tissue around the wound. He's been carrying this for a while." Ethan's chest tightened. "Someone shot him." "Yes." "And he never told me," Ethan whispered. "He couldn't," she said gently. Working dogs endure pain to protect their handlers. Shadow likely took the hit meant for you. The realization hit Ethan like a wave of ice. All those missions. All those nights. Somewhere along the way, Shadow had stepped in front of Death Ogonant, kept going like nothing happened. Anger burned beneath the relief. "Can you tell where it came from?" Ethan asked. Dr. Morales shook her head. "That part will be up to you." Ethan looked back through the glass at Shadow, resting peacefully. "I'll find out," he said quietly. "I owe him that." That evening, Ethan finally took Shadow home. The walk from the clinic to the car was slow. Shadow leaned against him, each step deliberate, but he walked. Officers standing outside clapped softly, some saluting. Shadow lifted his head proudly, tail wagging weakly. At home. Shadow circled the living room, sniffing every corner as if making sure the place still existed. Then he collapsed onto his favorite spot near the couch with a tired sigh. Ethan sat beside him, hand resting on Shadow's side, feeling each careful breath. "You scared me," Ethan whispered. Shadow nudged his hand. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon. Inside, a bond stronger than steel held firm. But somewhere out there, someone had pulled a trigger, and Ethan knew this story wasn't over yet. The nightmare didn't start with gunfire. It started with silence. Officer Ethan Cole woke just before dawn. Heart racing, his hand reaching instinctively for a leash that wasn't there. For a split second, fear clenched his chest. Then he heard it. A slow, steady breath. He turned his head and saw Shadow lying beside the couch, bandaged, battered, but alive. The relief hit so hard Ethan had to sit up. Shadow's eye opened at the movement. "Hey," Ethan whispered. "Morning, warrior?" Shadow's tail thumped once against the floor. "Weak but intentional," Ethan exhaled, resting his forehead against his knees. They'd made it through the night. But survival brought questions, and those questions had teeth. Later that morning, Ethan stood in the precinct briefing room with a cup of untouched coffee cooling in his hands. The evidence bag lay open on the table. Inside, the bullet fragment caught the light Dell, jagged, unmistakable. Ballistics tech Marrow adjusted his glasses. Fragments consistent with a .38 caliber round. Older ammo. Not something you see every day. Ethan frowned. "Meaning?" "Meaning whoever fired it wasn't some random street punk," Marrow said. "This was deliberate, old school." Ethan's jaw tightened. Old school meant experience, planning, intent. When could it have happened? Captain Reyes asked. Ethan swallowed. Weeks ago? Maybe longer. The room went quiet. Reyes leaned back slowly. That narrows it down to a handful of ops. Ethan's mind raced. Warehouse raids, traffic stops, fugitive chases. Then it hit him. The docks, he said. Reyes looked up. The Ramirez bust. Ethan nodded. We took down a weapons runner. Shots were fired, but none reported near me. Shadow broke formation briefly. Merrow's eyes widened. If Shadow crossed your line, he took it for me. Ethan finished quietly. No one spoke after that. That evening, Ethan returned home with a knot in his stomach. Shadow lifted his head when the door opened, ears twitching. Alert despite the pain. You're not supposed to be on duty, Ethan said gently. Shadow huffed softly. Offended, Ethan sat beside him, rubbing behind his ear. Someone tried to kill you, he murmured. And you kept going. Shadow's gaze stayed steady, loyal, unapologetic. I need to know who, Ethan continued. But I promise I won't put you in danger again. Shadow shifted closer, resting his head on Ethan's thigh. The message was clear. We face it together. Over the next few days, Ethan retraced every step of their past operations. Surveillance footage, body cams, dispatch logs. Patterns emerged too clean to ignore. The Ramirez case kept resurfacing. A weapons ring, missing evidence. A suspect who vanished before trial. Ethan felt the pieces locking together with a sickening click. One night, long past midnight, his phone buzzed, unknown number. You should have let the dog die. Ethan's blood ran cold. Another message followed. He's a liability. Ethan stood, heart pounding, eyes scanning the dark street outside his window. Shadow lifted his head, low growl rumbling deep in his chest. No, Ethan whispered. Easy. He texted back one word. Why? The response came instantly. Because next time, I won't miss. Ethan powered off the phone. The threat was real. And personal. The next morning, Internal Affairs opened a quiet investigation. Too quiet. Ethan trusted his gut more than protocol now. Someone inside knew. Someone had covered it up that night. Ethan packed a go bag and clipped Shadow's leash on gently. We're not running, he said. We're hunting the truth. Shadow stood, wincing but standing. They drove to the old docks, rain slicking the pavement, the city holding its breath. Ethan parked near the abandoned warehouse from the Ramirez bust. The same one where Shadow had stumbled. The door creaked open under Ethan's hand. Inside, dust hung thick. Shadows clung to corners. Shadow stopped suddenly, nose low, body tense. He growled. Ethan's pulse thundered. Footsteps echoed from the back. A voice emerged from the dark. Should have stayed retired, officer. Ethan's hand went to his weapon. The truth was finally stepping into the light. And this time, Ethan wasn't facing it alone. The safety clicked off before Ethan realized his thumb had moved. Shadow's growl deepened, vibrating through the dark warehouse like a warning bell. The single hanging bulb above flickered, throwing broken shadows across rusted crates and oil-stained concrete. The voice came again, closer now, amused, still carrying a gun for the dog. Cole? Ethan took a step forward, angling his body so Shadow was slightly behind him. Show yourself. Boots scraped. A man stepped into the weak, light mid-40s, lean eyes to calm for someone standing in front of an armed officer. Ethan recognized him instantly, and the recognition felt like a punch to the gut. Doyle, Ethan said. You were logistics on the Ramirez bust. Doyle smiled without warmth. Was? Shadow's hackles rose. He shifted, favoring his injured side, but holding his ground. Eyes locked on Doyle's hands. "You disappeared after the raid," Ethan said. "Evidence went missing." "So did Ramirez." Doyle shrugged. "People vanish all the time." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You fired that shot." Doyle's gaze flicked to Shadow, lingering on the bandages. "Didn't know the mutt would take it for you." Shadow lunged a half-step forward, teeth bared. Ethan tightened the leash. "Easy. Funny thing about dogs," Doyle continued. "They're loyal to a fault. Makes them predictable." Ethan raised his weapon. "Hands where I can see them." Doyle complied slowly, palms up, then laughed. "You think this ends with cuffs?" From the shadows behind him, a second figure moved. Then a third. Ethan's stomach dropped. Shadow barked sharp, commanding his training, cutting through the pain. He pivoted, placing himself between Ethan and the nearest threat. "Stance low and ready." "Shadow, stay," Ethan ordered quietly, though every instinct screamed to unleash him. Doyle's smile widened. "You should have let him die." "Would have been easier." Rage surged, hot and blinding. "He saved lives," Ethan said, "including mine." "Exactly," Doyle snapped. "That dog turned a clean job messy." "Ramirez paid for protection. When he ran, we cleaned it up." "Your partner almost ruined everything." "Almost." Ethan fired a warning shot into the concrete. The crack echoed. Dust erupted. The men froze. "Drop it," Ethan said. Now, one of the figures bolted. Shadow moved before Ethan could stop him. "Shadow, no." The canine surged forward, pain forgotten, a black blur of muscle and will. He tackled the runner mid-stride, taking him down hard. The man screamed as Shadow pinned him, teeth inches from his throat. Holding, not biting, perfect control. Doyle swore and reached for his. "WAISTBAND." Ethan fired. The bullet shattered a crate inches from Doyle's hand. On the ground, Doyle hesitated, then dove. The second man lunged toward Ethan. Shadow released the pinned suspect and turned, intercepting the charge. The impact knocked Shadow sideways. He yelped, stumbled, but didn't fall. Ethan moved. Years of drills snapped into place. 2 shots. Center mass. The attacker collapsed, weapons skittering across the floor. Doyle scrambled toward a side door. "Shadow!" Ethan shouted. Shadow sprinted, then faltered. Pain flared through him. His stride broke. He stumbled, collapsing to one knee. Ethan's heart seized. "Shadow!" Doyle looked back, eyes lighting with cruel opportunity. He raised his gun. Time slowed. Ethan stepped between them without thinking, spreading his arms, blocking the line of fire. "Don't." The shot rang out. Shadow launched. He slammed into Doyle's legs, sending the gun flying. They crashed to the ground. Shadow held him there, teeth locked on the sleeve. Snarling, fierce, controlled. Unyielding. Ethan cuffed Doyle. With shaking hands, sirens wailed in the distance. Back up at last. Ethan dropped to his knees beside Shadow. Hey, stay with me." Shadow panted hard, pain etched into every breath. Ethan pressed his forehead to Shadow's. "You did it. You're safe." Shadow licked his cheek, a soft, stubborn insistence. "I'm not done." Paramedics rushed in. Shadow was loaded onto a stretcher, Ethan riding with him, hand gripping fur, refusing to let go. At the hospital, as doctors stabilized Shadow again, Captain Reyes stood at Ethan's side. "Doyle's talking," she said. "We've got names. This goes deep." Ethan nodded, eyes never leaving Shadow. Good hours later, Shadow stirred. His tail moved weak, defiant. Ethan smiled through tears. "You hear that, boy?" "Justice." Shadow sighed, resting his head against Ethan's hand. The fight wasn't over, but the truth had been dragged into the light, and it didn't stand a chance against loyalty like theirs. The hospital room was quiet in a way Ethan Cole had never trusted. Machines hummed softly. 4 lines dripped at a steady rhythm. Shadow lay stretched out on the padded floor beside the bed. Bandages fresh, chest rising and falling with effort but alive. Again, the vets had warned Ethan that reopening the wound during the warehouse confrontation could have killed him. The words should have echoed in Ethan's head. Should have stayed back. Should have let backup handle it. Should have protected him better. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, staring at Shadow like he might vanish if he blinked too long. "You didn't have to do that," he whispered. Shadow's eye opened slowly. He shifted his head just enough to rest it on Ethan's boot. Guilt pressed down harder than fear ever had. Later that morning, Captain Reyes arrived with a stack of files and a look that said sleep had been optional for days. She closed the door gently behind her. "They're calling it a major internal corruption case," she said. Doyle wasn't alone. 2 supervisors. 1 evidence tech. And Ramirez? He's been found. Ethan's jaw clenched. "Alive?" Reyes nodded. "And talking?" Shadow forcing Doyle down ended whatever loyalty he had left. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Good." Reyes looked at Shadow, then back at Ethan. "Internal Affairs wants to talk to you." "Off the record." Ethan stiffened. "About what?" "About you disobeying direct procedure. About taking an injured canine into an active threat environment." Ethan didn't look away. "I'd do it again." Reyes studied him for a long moment. Then she sighed. "I know, but the department won't ignore it." That afternoon, the decision came. Shadow was officially placed on medical leave indefinite. The word felt heavier than any suspension Ethan had ever seen. The head veterinarian explained it carefully. "He's alive because he's strong. But he's also pushed his body beyond limits no dog should. Another field incident could end him." Ethan nodded, though his chest felt hollow. Shadow was a working dog, a protector. Asking him to stop was like asking him to stop breathing. That night, Ethan brought Shadow home again. The house felt quieter than before, not peaceful and finished. Shadow moved slower now, each step deliberate. He circled the living room, then stopped at the door where his tactical vest usually hung. He stared at it. Ethan swallowed. "Hey," he said softly. "You did your job." Shadow turned, ears lowered, confused. "You saved me," Ethan continued. "You saved a lot of people. That doesn't disappear because you're resting." Shadow let out a low sound, almost a protest. Ethan knelt beside him. "I know you still want to work," he said, voice breaking. "But I need you alive more than I need you in the field." Shadow stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he stepped away from the vest and lay down at Ethan's feet. Acceptance didn't mean weakness. It meant trust. Days passed. News broke. Arrests were made. Headlines called Shadow a hero. The department announced commendations, medals, ceremonies. Shadow didn't care. What mattered to him was Ethan's presence. Morning walks. Quiet nights. The sound of Ethan's voice. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Ethan sat on the porch steps with Shadow beside him. The air was warm, calm. "You know," Ethan said quietly, "they offered me a promotion." Shadow lifted his head. "Desk job," Ethan scoffed. "Safer, cleaner." Shadow's tail thumped once. Ethan smiled sadly. "Yeah, I said no." He rested his hand on Shadow's head. "If you can't run beside me, I won't run ahead without you." Shadow leaned into the touch in that moment. Ethan understood something he'd been too busy to see before. Being a hero wasn't about chasing danger. Sometimes, it was about knowing when to stop and choosing loyalty over pride. And those Shadow's days in the field were over. His purpose, WASN, single quotes, not yet. The ceremony was supposed to be simple. That's what the department said. Anyway, but nothing about Shadow had ever been simple. The courtyard outside the precinct filled slowly as officers gathered in full uniform. Badges catching the afternoon sun. Families stood behind the barricades. Cameras waited. Flags stirred in the breeze. At the center of it all stood Officer Ethan Cole, dress blues crisp. Heart heavier than it had been on his worst nights in the field. Shadow sat beside him, not in tactical gear. No vest, no patches. Just a black and tan German Shepherd with silver creeping into his muzzle and scars hidden beneath his fur. He sat tall, despite the limp he could no longer fully hide, ears forward. Eyes calm, still on duty in every way that mattered. When Captain Reyes stepped up to the podium, the crowd fell silent. Today, she began, we honor service that went beyond duty, loyalty that went beyond orders, and courage that refused to die quietly. She gestured toward Shadow. This canine took a bullet meant for his handler. He carried that wound silently while continuing to protect this city. And when the truth finally surfaced, he fought one last time not for glory, but for justice. Applause rippled through the courtyard. Shadow didn't flinch. Ethan knelt beside him as Reyes stepped down and another officer approached with a velvet. Resting on it was a small silver medal engraved with a single word, LOYLTY. Metal was attached gently to Shadow's collar. For the first time, Shadow wagged his tails, low, steady. Proud, Ethan's vision blurred. After the ceremony, the crowd thinned. Congratulations were offered. Photos taken. Then, eventually, it was just Ethan and Shadow again. Standing in the quiet courtyard, "You did good," Ethan whispered, scratching behind Shadow's ear. "You always did." Shadow nudged his hand. That evening, they drove to a place Ethan hadn't visited in years, the K9 training field. Empty now. Grass overgrown. Memories heavy in the air. Ethan unclipped the leash. Shadow took a few tentative steps forward. Then another. He broke into a slow trot, then stopped, turning back. Ethan smiled. "Go on." Shadow ran. Not fast. Not like before. But free. He circled the field once, twice, then returned. Dropping at Ethan's feet with a tired huff, Ethan sat beside him, shoulder to shoulder. Watching the sky turn orange. "I used to think our story would end with one of us not coming home," Ethan said quietly. "I was wrong." Shadow leaned into him. "It ends with both of us choosing to stay." Years later, new recruits would hear the story. They'd talk about the canine who took a bullet and kept working. About the handler who refused to give up. About loyalty that exposed corruption and saved lives. But the truth, the real truth, was quieter. It was morning walks instead of night raids. A warm floor instead of cold concrete. A dog sleeping peacefully. No longer fighting invisible battles. On a quiet night long after the medals were put away. Ethan lay on the couch with Shadow's head resting on his chest. His breathing was slow now, calm, trusting. Ethan stroked his fur gently. "You don't have to protect me anymore," he whispered. Shadow's tail moved once. He always would, because loyalty doesn't retire. It doesn't fade with age or injury. And it doesn't end when the uniform comes off. It lives in the promise kept. And this time, they both came home. Thanks for watching till end. Please like and subscribe my channel. I will be very thankful to you.